Let's get some more reaction to those results now. I'm joined in the studio by Xolani Fakude from the South African Democratic Teachers Union. Thank you so much for coming in at this hour, Xolani, but I'm sure you and your colleagues have been keeping a close eye on these developments tonight. A great energy in that hall. But let's start with that soundbite that we just heard there from the Democratic Alliance, disputing the matric pass rate announced by the minister. It's not the first time they've done that, but also seeming to fan this theory that's been doing the rounds, often on social media, saying, oh, we're pushing through thousands of children, the education system is just carrying them through. But they're talking about a difference of almost 30% that they say the numbers are being ballooned to help make the education department look good. What's your reaction to that?
Well, firstly, thank you, Marcelle. Let me firstly greet you and let me greet the viewers as well. Thank you for having us at this time of the hour. We do appreciate that as a union. Look, we certainly would not at this stage agree with the assertion by the Democratic Alliance in the context of our matric results. We as teachers, we understand the challenges that the system is still characterized by. One of those challenges is actually the throughput rate as to how many learners enter grade 1 and ultimately how many do actually sit for their final exam. Now, we believe that the socio-economic complexities of our country, the inequalities that exist between the haves and the haves not, the number of learners that the system right now caters for, especially in public schools, we believe that those numbers are of such a significance that you cannot just dismiss the matric results as per what the DA would suggest that we do. As a union, as Sadtu, for instance, we have been the first and we have been very consistent to say that the education system is not just solely about the matric results only. It is about the entire system, from early childhood development throughout for the entire remaining 12 years. So what we want to say, Marcelle, in reaction to that, is that yes, there is a concern that we all should have about the throughput rate. But at the same time, let us not also undermine or even lessen the work that has been put in under the circumstances, especially by the teachers, the support personnel, the learners, the parents of this group that would have had to deal with COVID from their grade 10 class and then later deal with another pandemic called load shedding towards their matric exams.
To name but a few of the issues that we face on a day-to-day basis, Xolani, and that's where I want to take my next question. Now that we've dealt with reaction to the Democratic Alliance's stance following that result, this announcement of these results I found was more emotional than the ones that have gone before, because often it is emotional. 12-year journey, especially the announcement by the government department, a 12-year journey for families who have to go through the worst just to get their child to that point, such as the importance still placed on the matric results. This, however, was always going to be a landmark set of results because, like you said, this is a cohort of students as well as teachers who have been through fire over the last 3 years, dealing with COVID. We almost say it flippantly, dealing with COVID, dealing with power cuts, dealing with unending poverty and inequality, and getting those results that they got. You cannot actually undermine how important this year's results were.
Absolutely, you actually are correct. I mean, in the context, Marcelle, of our education system, in the democratic dispensation from 94 to now, in the context of our education system, I think the highest results a pass that we would have had was in 2019. And this first very, very good compared to that. But now you are correct in that we are dealing with a group, a generation that has faced an unprecedented pandemic that completely changed, by the way, even how, as education workers, as teachers, actually access our learners so that they can be learning and teaching. We speak, Marcelle, of the inequalities in the system. Now, we want to speak very sharply about the work that the education workers in the quantiles 1 to 3 actually put in. And by the way, we want to take it further and say that actually all education workers and teachers should be commended, even those in the higher quintile schools. The fact of the matter is that we've got an education system that still relies on a lot of additional work. We've got an education system that for curriculum coverage, it still relies on a teacher for matric to be in class and somehow deliver in a morning class, in a late afternoon class, in a weekend class, in a holiday class, which is not even actually supposed to be a feature of education system, but it is our reality as teachers in this country. So what this tells you, Marcelle, is that we certainly need to have a constant collaborative conversation about how we see education in this country. We insist as a union that education should be seen as a public good. There can be nothing less than that. There should be increased public sector investment towards education in particular. If you say that education is one of the apex priorities that can help the transformation of our country, then we need to speak to it as well in terms of how we invest in education.
I see just a while ago, Sadtu called again for government to relook its budget spend on infrastructure in schools, because that too is a contributing factor to this issue in all of our province at the beginning of the year when we struggle with the placement of kids. And your organization has made the point repeatedly, it's not just about late registrations or online this and online that, it's also about the lack of infrastructure. And yes, we hear, I spoke to the spokesperson of the Gauteng Education Department just the other day. They're trying to build new temporary schools. They're trying to do this, that and the other. But in your opinion, is there enough of a strategy behind how to build infrastructure that is so desperately needed in so many of our communities that are growing and expanding at a big rate?
You're asking a very critical question, Marcelle. And our very quick response to that is that, yes, there are plans. There are plans to address the infrastructure issues in education. There are plans. Sometimes we can even say that there are probably even resources dedicated to that. However, accountability, implementation is what we believe we are still lacking. We are saying that this day and age, we should not be speaking about even one school possibly with pit latrines. We should not be.
Absolutely.
But yet we still do have that conversation this day and age.
Because you're talking about pit latrines on one side, and yet we need laptops and digital blackboards on the other side.
Absolutely. How do you even move to those laptops and the digital boards when, by the way, even the electricity infrastructure is not adequate in the very same school? So it is very clear that our challenges are quite deep. However, when we speak about infrastructure, as a union, we are calling for more investment. Year in, year out in this country, Marcelle, we are told that the education budget takes the lion's share of the national fiscus. But now, is this education budget actually responding to actually the needs that are there within the sector? You are correct when you speak about migration and population dynamics, urbanization dynamics and trends. Is the education department or the education budget responding to those? We would have a very different view to that. What we want to see happening, we want to see a fundamentally increased investment of the public funds towards public schools. The public schools have shown, they have shown for a number of years, they have shown through the results that were released today that despite the circumstances, we still do try to prevail. But Marcelle, now here is an important thing. When we speak about shortages of education infrastructure, we should also ask ourselves about the role that communities play.
Yes.
In Gauteng alone, just this past festive season, the HOD was telling me recently, we had about 92 schools being vandalized. Now, we still are struggling to actually get to what we call an ideal school in a majority of the schools in this country. But then you've got communities that actually vandalize the very schools where their children should be learning. By the way, Marcelle, you still have got communities. We'll be moving towards the national elections at some point. We are going to see many community protests. And for some reason, a school will be identified as a bargaining chip.
Why is that? Is it to try and get, is that what gets attention? Because you're shooting your own community in the foot, aren't you?
Our question precisely, Marcelle, you will be fighting for potholes, you'll be fighting for electricity supply, but then you will close a school as a way to communicate your displeasure. And by the way, you will leave the tavern just a few houses down the street. It tells you that we need to have a conversation, and it needs to be consistent as a country. We need to have an introspection. In fact,
at grassroots level.
Yes, absolutely. As Sadtu was saying, that we probably need to go through a collective introspection as a society, as South Africans, about how we see education, about how we want to see education playing a role towards our societal development.
Look, I come from a family of teachers, so I understand absolutely understand where you're coming from. Those are old school teachers of a previous generation. But there in itself, I learned about the importance of community, the importance of taking care of the whole child, and not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, as my mother would always say. We saw a lot of that during the pandemic, and a lot of our teachers really had to dig deep because they couldn't just everybody go online, everybody log on at home, mommy and daddy's fiber will take care of this, that, and the other. The majority of our teachers had to deal with whatever resources were at their disposal. With these results that have come out, but also as a result of what we saw over the last few years, do you think there's been a change in how the importance, like you spoke of, the importance of teachers, their standing in society? Do you think that there's been a change in the importance of the work that they do, and the importance that they have in a community, not just as teachers in front of a blackboard, but in the role that they play in molding our citizens of the future?
In fact, Marcelle, you are asking a very rhetorical question. And because what you are raising through your question is what we are saying as a union as well. In fact, I would say more directly that the standing of teachers in a community has actually declined. It has not gone on a trajectory that we would have preferred to see as a union of education workers. In fact, we take it a step further to say that if we need this sector to be able and have the capacity to attract and even absorb more education workers, young education workers, the environment needs to reach a particular optimum level.
To attract the best of the best.
Attract the best of the best.
Yeah.
And unfortunately right now, that is not the case. You will go to a university, you will be taught, you'll be trained how to be the best of teachers ever. You go to a school that has got pit latrines. You go to a school that does not have an administration block. And then it immediately, even as a young teacher, changes your entire understanding of what you are supposed to actually contribute as an individual.
And that despondency then has an impact on your students.
Absolutely.
And it just becomes a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
It's a vicious cycle because the state, the mental state of the teachers, the mental state of the learners have got a very, very fundamental impact on the educational outcomes. In fact, Marcelle, we say as a union, that is why we want to link this particular element of our conversation with psychosocial support services within the sector.
So needed.
Coming from a COVID pandemic, dealing now with a load shedding pandemic,
or just the day-to-day trauma of living in South Africa.
You can imagine the amount of socio-economic challenges that we have in our country. You've got teachers, you've got learners, you've got parents who have to deal with that on a daily basis.
And yet the last teacher they think of appointing is the life skills teacher or the guidance teacher, whatever they used to call them in the past.
It cannot be correct. It cannot necessarily assist the conversation. But also, Marcelle, now the number of support personnel in psychosocial support services function of the DBE, it leaves a lot to be desired. We are asking ourselves as a union that to what extent does the DBE as the lead department in our sector interact with other departments, interact with NGOs, interact with stakeholders like unions, for instance, on issues like psychosocial support services so that they can be available.
And mental health services for teachers themselves because of what they have to deal with.
Absolutely.
So now let's look forward to the challenges laying ahead. We do believe there are lots of plans in place to change the curriculum in a certain way for streams for kids once they reach high school, so that we can better equip them for the job market or whatever jobs that they are that we're trying to create. Have they brought teachers along on this journey, the Department of Education now? Have they brought teachers along on that journey so that when those changes take place, those are your frontline workers that are going to have to take those changes and implement it, like with all the other curriculum changes we've had in the past?
In fact, as a union, what we would want to say is that, yes, there are constant engagements on curriculum transformation, which is what we are calling for as a union. In fact, we are even calling it, we are saying that we want the decolonization of the curriculum, in fact. So yes, there are consistent engagement with the necessary departments, including, by the way, the Department of Basic Education. But now the issue here is that when we have got a three-stream model, this is precisely what we are talking about. We've got a three-stream model which we are supporting as a union. In fact, we want to encourage the department to really be emphatic on implementation. But now, when you talk of a 3-stream model, because not every learner is going to be academically gifted or even academically supported enough.
And the job market doesn't need that.
And by the way, not the entire job market needs that, by the way. So we really encourage the route towards the 3 streams model. However, we are saying the resourcing part of it becomes once again a very fundamental issue for us. If we are going to have schools for specialization, you cannot only have them in the bigger urbanized provinces like Gauteng and Western Cape. They must be all over. They must even be there in the rural schools, by the way. So the critical issue here is about us, Marcelle, saying that we see education as an apex priority. Let us therefore fund it adequately to be an apex priority. When we speak about curriculum transformation, as such, we take it even further. We are saying that not only curriculum transformation, but it is also about how you profile our indigenous languages to become languages of academia. They must become languages of science. The KZN province has shown us with its improvement from position number 6 to number 3. Yes, of course, it is not about just only the beauty contest of which province comes number 1 and so forth. We don't like that beauty contest, by the way, as a union. But now, the work that the province put in the context of the isiZulu language, the improvement that you saw on the isiZulu language and how it affected
the child,
how it affected the statistics that then came from the province. Whilst we had Shivenda and Xitsonga declining, now it tells you that actually we need to be emphatic. We need to be collaborative about how we bring all stakeholders towards the same agreement. We can have all the accords. We are even going further, Marcelle. We are saying that even the private sector itself, to what extent does the private sector take accountability and responsibility for the resourcing of public education? We are saying that all those companies listed in the JSE, how many of them have adopted schools and ensure in the communities where they are running their mines that those schools are well funded and resourced? So we're saying that there must be accountability all around. All around.
Okay, we could go on for a while by the sounds of it. It's such an important topic, but thank you so much for making the time for us to discuss it. We do have, this is a great excuse to have these important conversations, ongoing conversations, and let's hope as the years go on, we don't see such a big gap between the results from tonight and the results from the other night, because that's what our future in this country needs. Xolani Fakude from the South African Democratic Teachers Union, thank you so much for joining us.